Hello, everyone. Let's give it 30 more seconds for everyone to join in, and then we can start off with the webinar. Yes, I think we are good to go. So very good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone joining in. We welcome you to another episode of our webinar series. The topic in discussion today is unleashing the power of collaborative brainstorming, and we are very excited about our guest speaker today. I'm Siobhan from the sales team of Creately, and I'm excited to be your host and moderator for today's event. Before I introduce our speaker, let's take a quick look into what collaborative brainstorming is and why it's important. So collaborative brainstorming is a creative problem-solving technique that involves people from different backgrounds or perspectives working together to come up with ideas or solutions. It is considered one of the best ways to improve processes, solve problems, or even plan projects. This also helps you to tap into the creativity of the entire team and improve problem solving and team collaboration efforts. So for all the first timers here, I'd like to introduce you to Creately on who we are and what we do. So we are a visual collaborative platform that helps teams ideate, plan, and execute all type of projects. It's used by teams to brainstorm, visualize ideas, map processes, or even run projects. Creately has over 10 million active users across 200 countries, and the application is available in 17 languages: Spanish, English, French, Arabic, to name a few. We have been in operation for the past 15 years, and the team is spread across 9 countries. Some of our key clients are NASA, Netflix, Facebook, Amazon, and Soho, to name a few. Also, here are a few reviews we've gotten on top SaaS platforms in the world. And also, please stay tuned to see Creately's unique plans and the unlimited team collaborations with a special live webinar discount. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker for today, who is a leading expert on visual thinking and brainstorming. Also, he's the author and publisher of the Mind Mapping Software blog and the author of Power Tips and Strategies for Mind Mapping. He is none other than Chuck Frey. We are excited to see Chuck deep dive into the art of collaborative brainstorming and how to overcome challenges and run successful sessions. Over to you, Chuck.
All right, thank you very much. Let me just get my slides up on screen here. Oops. All right, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
All right, very good. Thank you so much to the Creately team for inviting me to be part of today's event. As Siobhan kind of alluded to, I've been working, studying, and writing about both creativity and visual thinking for several decades now. And I've done a lot of research into the intersection of these two areas. Ever since the visual collaboration tools came on the scene over a decade ago, I've been striving to understand how teams are using them to enhance their brainstorming sessions, whether they're working face-to-face, hybrid, or fully remote. And I've come to the conclusion that visual collaboration tools are literally a force multiplier. In other words, they have the potential to take the effectiveness and creativity of teams to a whole new level. In the next hour, it's my goal to help you understand how to do that and to avoid some of the pitfalls along the way. So let's get started. Now, brainstorming is as much of an art as it is a practice. Conducting effective team brainstorming sessions sometimes seems like one of the great mysteries of business. Most companies do it on a regular basis, but if you ask the people who run them, they would probably say they're not all that happy with the results. Why? Because creativity, of course, can be very elusive. It depends on a lot of things, including the preparation and process that you use to run this common type of meeting. And it actually takes more forethought and preparation than most people think. The success of this type of meeting depends to a huge degree on the people you select to participate in the brainstorming session. Think about it. You've got people who are very gregarious and expressive. Others might be quiet, reserved, introverted. Some of them may have great ideas, but they fear sharing them because they don't want to invite criticism from their peers or bosses. Often managers just schedule a brainstorming session and expect participants to throw out their top of mind ideas. And then they wonder why the ideas that are shared during these sessions aren't of the greatest value. Clearly, there's more to it than getting together and just doing a brain dump. For a group brainstorming session to be successful, you need to establish some clear ground rules. That's another major factor, and we'll talk more about those in a few minutes. And finally, brainstorming sessions need to have a clear objective that defines what success looks like. The very idea of putting constraints on creativity somehow feels like the wrong thing to do, but focusing the group's energy on a narrow objective or goal actually helps to increase the value of the ideas that are generated. We're going to take a brief look at brainstorming biases. One of the challenges of running a successful team brainstorming session is that we have these biases that underlie our thinking, and often we're not even consciously aware of them, but they can affect the outcomes of brainstorming sessions. And if you're facilitating one of these sessions, you need to make sure you're not falling prey to them. We're going to look at 4 common creative biases. So let's dig into the first one. The first bias is brute thinking. It's a common practice in both individual and group brainstorming sessions. It's the act of simply capturing any and all ideas that are at the top of your mind. But think about that for a moment. What are the chances that the ideas that are percolating in your mind right now are of extraordinary value and they're the perfect solution to whatever creative challenge you're facing? Actually, pretty low. Yet people do it all the time. It's easy, it's quick, it doesn't require any advanced preparation. It yields a decent crop of ideas, but it's hard to see at the time that they may not be of the greatest value. Moving beyond brute think requires forethought and preparation. Remember, one of the factors we're dealing with is that a lot of people don't consider themselves to be naturally creative. You're forcing them to move beyond their comfort zone in a meeting like this. You need to first make them feel like their ideas are safe. Then you need to prime the pump and help your team members think in some new and fruitful directions, because most people are habitual thinkers, and you need to kind of kick them out of that. You need to stimulate their thinking to be more divergent, to look at your challenges from different perspectives and help them get out of their rutted habitual paths of thinking. As I just heard in a recent podcast with visual thinking expert Dave Gray, we're often not able to solve a problem because we haven't put the right frame around it. That's a big part of your job, to move your team beyond the habitual frame that everybody uses unconsciously to a more creative mindset where new ideas, possibilities, and opportunities can emerge. Recency is another form of bias. Simply put, it's a tendency to put a greater value on an idea that the team has just brainstormed just in the last few minutes and to undervalue an idea that the group may have come up with, say, at the beginning of the session. The new idea is still top of mind for meeting participants, so they tend to perceive it as having greater value than anything they brainstormed previously. Actually, for best results, as we'll see, you need to encourage your team not to immediately judge ideas. Brainstorming and evaluation need to be done separately, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes as well. Familiarity bias is another thinking habit that can get in the way of a successful brainstorming session, whether you're working alone or with a team. Simply put, we tend to favor ideas that are similar to what we're comfortable with now. And conversely, we tend to undervalue ideas that are a bit more extreme, seem to be impractical, or that would require you or your team to make big changes. And as I've already alluded to, people's behavior and ways of thinking tend to be strongly driven by habit. That includes how they brainstorm ideas. Ideas that are too challenging the ideas that aren't too challenging feel safe. Ideas that are more out there feel risky, and so people might not share them. You need to get them thinking outside that mindset and to explore some new directions and possibilities, to go beyond the familiar and the safe to some things that may be of much greater value to your organization. Here's a bias that I believe has one of the biggest negative impacts on individual brainstorming, but it can affect teams too. It's the tendency to stop brainstorming as soon as we have generated one idea that feels like the right solution. It's a common practice. I'm sure you've done it many times. I have. We're all incredibly busy. Most of us don't even have enough time to think, much less brainstorm new ideas for our business. If we're able to quickly generate one good idea, we can check that box, move on to the next task. Stopping with the first right idea feels safe, but it's actually not very creative most of the time. It's an even bigger problem if your mission is to generate new high value ideas that'll help power the future growth of your organization. Why? If you and your team stop brainstorming too soon, you may never discover higher value ideas that you might have uncovered if you kept going. Creativity experts encourage individuals and teams to keep brainstorming for a specific amount of time. Usually 30 minutes is recommended. Use as many creative thinking tools and techniques as you can to stretch your team's thinking in new directions. Capture every idea, no matter how ridiculous it might sound. You never know, one crazy idea that everybody chuckles at could be the stepping stone to a perfect solution. The bottom line is keep going. When it comes to brainstorming, the quantity of ideas you're able to generate is critical to uncovering one or more high quality ideas. To help drive this point home, I'd like to briefly share with you an analogy from the underground mining industry. Rich deposits of ore are rarely sitting on top of the ground waiting to be scooped up and processed. No, they're usually buried under many feet of something called overburden. That's just a fancy mining industry term for the low value dirt or rock that sits on top of the rich seams of ore. The overburden might contain small amounts of ore, but generally speaking, it's not very valuable. The brainstorming equivalent of overburden is the top of mind ideas that we just talked about. We still need to get them out of our minds and into some sort of tangible form. But the point is we need to keep digging deeper to uncover the really valuable ideas that tend to hide on the periphery of our thinking. Brainstorming in corporate settings has been studied and written about since at least the 1950s. One of the principles most creativity experts agree upon is you need to follow a process. While that may sound counterintuitive, placing a structure on something that's by its nature is unstructured and unpredictable, it actually does tend to lead to better outcomes. The 5-step process I'm sharing with you on the screen is a simple, proven approach that I really like, and we're going to explore each step briefly. I paste a big red arrow under step 2, generating ideas, because it's the fun part that everybody naturally jumps to. But as you can see, there's actually more to it than that. Step 1 is problem definition. Before you and your team start brainstorming ideas, you really ought to spend some time clearly defining your challenge. Why? Because you need to make sure you're solving the right problem, not just simply picking away at symptoms. This is a common problem for individuals and teams alike. We think we know what the problem is, or more commonly, you and your team members may each have different perceptions or levels of knowledge about it. Using a tool like Creately to deconstruct your problem can help you develop a shared understanding of what you're actually trying to solve for, and it might actually start to reveal hints of ideas or potential solutions. However, I do realize that time is an incredibly precious resource in every organization. What if you don't have enough time to do this step as part of your brainstorming session? One solution is for you, the meeting facilitator, to put together a briefing document and share it with the group a day or two ahead of time. It can serve as a level set and at least help you achieve some sort of a shared understanding of the scope, elements, and effects of the problem. Just make sure your briefing document is both concise, so people read it or at least skim it, and that it's unbiased. Step 2 is generating ideas. This is the fun part that everybody recognizes and loves, idea generation. Here's a few tips to make sure this step goes well. Don't rely on brute thinking, which we've already talked about. Asking people to share the top of mind ideas is certainly a good place to start, but you need to keep going beyond that, and you need to help, as we've said, get people out of their habitual paths of thinking and into some new ways of looking at the problem, typically from a variety of creative perspectives. And I'm going to briefly cover 3 of my favorite ideation techniques that can help you to do this. The first is called Scamper. It's a powerful tool for improving ideas as well as generating new ones. The name stands for the 10 creative ways of manipulating ideas or looking at them from different perspectives. Each of the branches of the mind map you see on your screen contain dozens of word prompts. that can be used to spur your team's thinking in new directions. For example, if I open up the substitute branch, there are some of the stimuli and prompts it contains on your screen. You simply select one that looks promising and apply it to your idea. For example, what if we substituted a different process? What if this idea could be used in a different environment? What if it had a different shape? You get the general idea. The next one is something that's been popularly called board of directors. It's powerful because it forces you to look at your challenge from different and unique perspectives, in this case, as if you are actually someone else. It asks you to imagine if you're standing before an imaginary board of directors composed of incredibly smart people, such as the ones in the mind map on this slide. They could be famous people, living or dead, someone you really admire, and you simply imagine yourself asking them how they would solve this problem, or what are some approaches we might try. You can also do this with professions. How would a chef solve your challenge? A pilot, a juggler? These perspective shifts can unlock a surprising amount of creativity because it helps you get out of your own head and imagine someone else solving the problem. Thirdly, reversing your assumptions can often unlock new insights and ideas. This approach works because it forces us to surface those assumptions that are underlying our thinking. And again, we may not even be aware of them. But they're still there and they tend to limit our thinking. Reversing them forces us to look at our problems from the opposite direction. And these prompts are a few examples of the types of questions you could ask to challenge your assumptions and unlock new possibilities. And before we move on, I just want to emphasize these are only 3 examples of ideation exercises you can use with your team to help them think more divergently. There's many more that you can explore on your own, but I recommend that you include at least 1 or 2 of them in your brainstorming sessions to get your team members thinking more creatively, and just as importantly, keep the momentum, keep the creative flow going throughout your session. The third step in our creative processing is incubation, and that happens after you finish generating ideas. Literally, you need to mentally or physically walk away from your ideas for a couple of hours or a couple of days. But while you do so, your subconscious mind is continuing to mull things over and work on the problem. And by the time you get back together or come back in front of your ideas, you probably have generated some additional ones, which you can add to your list. Once again, because everyone's incredibly busy and is starved for time, you may want to schedule separate meetings for brainstorming and evaluation, which is the next step in the creative process. So the time between that would be your incubation time. We'll cover the last 2 steps of the creative problem-solving process a little bit later after Siobhan gives us a demonstration of how Creately can be used to support and enhance brainstorming sessions. But now we're going to turn our attention to a few other areas. I'd like to share with you some tips to help you plan and conduct more successful brainstorming sessions. First, as we've said, you need a clear objective. What do you want to accomplish? What does the ideal outcome look like? Applying this kind of constraint to your session is important. It helps focus the team's thinking. Next, I want to touch on the difference between synchronous and asynchronous brainstorming sessions. Synchronous is the model that we're all most familiar with, where we all meet either physically or virtually at a specific date and time, and we brainstorm together. The important word there is together. Tools like Creately, however, also make another model of brainstorming powerful, called asynchronous ideation. That's where you create a board, share the URL with your team members, give them a simple set of instructions and a time frame within which they can contribute their ideas whenever it's most convenient for them, not at the same time. Facilitation is very important to successful brainstorming sessions, and I recommend that you always have someone who's going to run the meeting. Otherwise, the team's momentum can quickly die. The facilitator needs to have at least a couple of exercises at the ready to spur the group's thinking as they work their way through the challenge and the potential solutions to it. The facilitator also has another important role. They have to serve as a traffic cop, making sure that everyone contributes. You may need to encourage 1 or more introverts to share their ideas, or to make sure that 1 or 2 strong personalities don't dominate the meeting. That's a common problem. You also need to discourage immediate judgment of ideas and shut down any critics. There should be no criticism of ideas during your brainstorming session. Who should you invite? And we could focus an entire webinar on this topic alone. But for best results, I recommend a cross-section of personalities, roles, and knowledge. Try to avoid strong personality, narcissistic type people if possible. They have a very negative effect on brainstorming sessions. It's okay to invite a few introverts. Sometimes they have some really valuable ideas, but nobody's ever asked them, or they've never found a safe environment where they can share them without being judged. Where should you hold your brainstorming session? If you don't have any other choice, you can definitely use any conference room at your organization if you're doing a face-to-face session, but I don't recommend it. An off-site location is preferred if you can afford it, simply because it removes people from interruptions and helps them to focus better. Also, if you're holding the meeting at a different location, it sends an important signal to people that you expect different thinking because you're in a different setting. If your city has an inspiring or creative workspace or meeting space, that's ideal. Not necessarily a dedicated brainstorming space, but just some place that's inspiring or compelling, maybe from an architectural standpoint, someplace that's different and engaging. Running your brainstorming session, when you're ready to conduct it, here's a few tips to help ensure that it goes smoothly. First, designate someone as the scribe. This is the person whose job it is to capture all the ideas. They need to be well-versed in the tool you're using for idea capture, such as Creately. Make sure they know that it's not their job to interpret the ideas of their coworkers, but to record everything without bias. They should also capture every idea. Again, it's not their job to serve as the arbiter or editor of ideas. They're just the recorder. Next, I recommend that you share a few simple ground rules with your team. Again, no judgment of anyone else's ideas, no immediate evaluation, even though it might be tempting to do it. There'll be plenty of time for that later. All ideas are for a game, no matter how ridiculous or outlandish they might seem at first glance. Encourage your session participants to engage in something I call plussing. That is, adding to or enhancing or building off of each other's ideas. Remember, some of the best ideas are built from combinations of smaller ideas. Consider doing a warm-up exercise to get group participants used to sharing their ideas. Again, the whole focus of the session is pushing them out of their comfort zone. So it's always good to do a warm-up, and again, to have some divergent thinking exercises ready so you can manage the energy level during the brainstorming session. That's a must. Next, creating a positive and supportive environment. I've kind of alluded to the fact that that's super important. Here's a few thoughts on how to do that. They overlap with some of the things we talked about, but they bear repeating because nothing can destroy a brainstorming session faster than a dysfunctional interpersonal environment. First, again, the mix of personalities you invite is critical. I've talked about the problems with strong personalities, but you should also avoid groupthink, picking people who all think alike. Groupthink will definitely not work to your advantage if you want some really great, valuable, different ideas. Instead, I recommend that you create a cross-sectional team of people, perhaps people from different roles or departments if possible. A wide range of thinking styles is what you're after. Think twice about inviting the bosses of any of the participants. Your team needs to feel free to share even the wildest ideas without fear of criticism or reprisal from their manager. Don't invite managers with a reputation for being autocratic. You don't want them taking over and causing people to literally shut down. If they sense any fear about sharing ideas, they won't, simply put. Once again, beware those dominant personalities, the people who love to hear the sound of their own voices. You don't want them drowning out the ideas of the less vocal members of the group. If one or more people are very quiet during the brainstorming session, I absolutely encourage you to draw them out, get them involved, ask them questions like, what do you think? If possible, again, aim for an on-site location. Interruptions can be very destructive if people are getting called out of the room to handle little emergencies, or if they're getting calls or checking their phones. If possible, check your phones at the door. I think that's a good point, or they should at least be turned off. They're just such unbelievable sources of distraction and interruption, even during normal times, but they're even more problematic during a brainstorming session. If you're doing a virtual brainstorming session, which of course is more common these days, it's even more important to have a plan to keep your team members engaged. And remember, they're each in a different environment with a myriad of distractions. So, how do visual tools supercharge creativity? This is leading us up to Siobhan's demonstration. There's no question about it in my mind. Utilizing a tool like Creately to capture ideas during a group brainstorming session is not only very efficient, I believe it can actually amplify the results of the brainstorming session. Here's why. When participants share an idea, the scribe adds it to the visual canvas on the screen at the front of the room, or if each person's individually adding ideas, the point is they can see their ideas on the board in the context of other ideas. And that makes them really feel about their sense, really good about their sense of contribution. And it gives them a burst of energy that makes them more likely to share more ideas. It can really help introverts get more involved in the session. In other words, I think it creates a really positive dynamic that serves teams very well. Second, the visual canvas is very flexible. It enables the scribe to move ideas around and group them in different ways. This can help team members see patterns and relationships that weren't visible before. I've been in brainstorming sessions where the facilitator first has participants write their ideas on sticky notes and add them to a physical wall. And after an initial wave of ideation, the group discusses how to classify and regroup them into logical collections, and then move related ideas adjacent to each other. It's easy to replicate using a collaborative tool like Creately. Third, seeing these patterns makes it easier to see what's missing. The facilitator can even use the existing ideas on screen as stepping stones to encourage people to brainstorm additional ones or to build bigger ideas out of smaller ones, like we talked about. Finally, if you're doing a remote session, some tools actually enable you to contribute ideas anonymously. This might give some team members the courage to share controversial or challenging ideas that they might be afraid to share otherwise. Overall, I believe collaboration tools like Creately can help organizations to get greater value out of team brainstorming sessions. Here's another big benefit of this type of tool. They have an infinite canvas. That means you and your team have plenty of room to spread out your ideas. Compare that to the old way of doing a brainstorming session with flip chart pages or whiteboards. When they're full, there's literally no more room for ideas, and they can't be moved around or manipulated or regrouped like we talked about very easily. I've even seen cases where a team has used an online visual collaboration tool like Creately to, for example, brainstorm 50 ideas. Of those, they selected 10 that appear to be promising. Then they moved them to another part of the canvas and then focused in on brainstorming ways to improve those 10 ideas. You can also designate ideas of this unlimited workspace for different ideation exercises. The sky's really the limit. You've got an incredible amount of room in which to work and brainstorm. Here's one final benefit that these powerful visual collaboration tools make possible. It has to do with the flow of ideas. The object on the screen is called a talking stick. It was used by some indigenous North American tribes to designate that its holder had the right to speak during powwows and other gatherings. When he held the talking stick, no one else could talk. So what does that have to do with brainstorming? It's a metaphor for the typical team brainstorming session where a small group of participants are verbally sharing their ideas. Importantly, they have to do it one at a time. Only one person can speak, and then the person designated as the scribe records them. The point is that when you have this flow of only one idea at a time, when the person's sharing an idea, they have the talking stick. Uh, this slows down the flow of ideas significantly. Uh, in a virtual brainstorm where all participants can share ideas at the same time, the facilitator simply presents the creative thinking question, prompt, or exercise, gives the participants 5 to 10 minutes to record as many ideas as they can, and everyone does so simultaneously. There is no talking stick or artificial restriction on how quickly ideas can be captured. The board fills up literally at the speed of thought. And I believe that both the quantity and quality of ideas is higher in this kind of situation because the group is able to enter a powerful flow state of creativity. By the way, you can do this during a face-to-face brainstorming session too. It's just that all participants will need to have a device like a laptop connected to the shared workspace and the ability to add ideas to it in real time, simultaneously, like we talked about. So now I'm going to turn over the webinar to Siobhan, who's going to demonstrate how to use Creately to enhance team brainstorming sessions. Siobhan?
Thanks, Chuck. So let me share my screen and walk you through how Creately works. And let me go ahead and share my screen. I hope I'm audible enough and that everyone can see my screen. Yes, perfect. So what you see over here is Creately's infinite canvas, where you could have one or many of your use cases. As you can see, I have many use cases listed down over here, and you can pan in and out of this workspace. So for today, I've gone ahead and renamed my workspace for today's event. And to start off with, I'd like to walk you through Creately Shape Library and Template Library. So what you see over here is the most commonly or recently used shapes. And if you're looking for any advanced shapes, all you got to do is click on all shapes, which will redirect you to an extensive shape library from concept maps, Gantt chart, Venn diagrams, and many more. Moving on to the templates of Creately. Creately has a very advanced set of templates broken down by use cases and industry category. Since today's webinar is focused on brainstorming and ideation, so let's see what type of templates we have over here. So we do have brainstorming boards, ideation board templates, concept map templates, mind maps, and even round robin brainstorming templates. So for today, let's take a brainstorming board into the workspace, and I'll tell you how to navigate through Creately. So let's take one of these templates. Perfect. Here you go. So this is how the template would appear on Creately. It'll give you a step-by-step process on how to navigate Creately. So we actually can follow these steps. So the first step says, ask your team to pick a box and include their names as participants. So I've actually gone ahead and added my name, designation, and I've added Chuck in as well. So step two is to note down many ideas as possible within a specific time limit. So I've gone ahead and added a few sample ideas over here, and also step three would be to vote for the best ideas that you think. Yeah. So once you go into one of these sticky notes, you can edit the text over here, and you can change colors according to your wish. We have an extensive set of colors over here. And also, for an example, if you want a hyperlink added into the shape, you can just go through this as well. So I want to show you how a diagram can be connected with the data capabilities of Creately, or in simpler terms, how you can give life to a shape. So once you click on these sticky notes, you get a shape data panel onto your right hand side corner. So that has two tabs, which is notes and data. So what this data field does is you can tie in any attribute that you want into the shape. Yeah? So whether it's a text field, number field, date field, or even people. So what this people tab means is once you add that people tab, you can assign a specific person to this shape. Yeah. So I have my entire team of Creately over here. I'll go ahead and assign this to myself. Yeah. And moving on to the notes section, this is basically a fully fledged word editor where you can have headings, numbered list, bullet list, to-do list. You can have tables in it and even upload files or diagrams which supports this shape or the idea that you have over here. So what I've done is I actually have a sample for you, which I've added over here. Let me show you. Yes, here you go. So into the notes section, I have a heading over here. I have a description about the idea I provided on this card, and also to achieve that idea, what is my to-do list. So these are very dynamic fields that I can change according to the progress of a project. And also I've added a table, and I've added image over here where you can resize the images according to your wish. And also I've added a document, a supporting document over here, so that anyone comes into Creately, they can just go through the notes section and they have all the information that they need to about this specific idea that I have over here. So this is basically the ideation stage of a project. So let me walk you through the execution stage of this project as well. Yeah. So I have the same cards replicated over here, and what I have over here is a Kanban board and a timeline model. Yeah. So this simple shape put into a Kanban board automatically becomes a task. and it also gets a status field. So once you go over here, you see the project status, it says to do. If you navigate through the Kanban board, so it'll change the status of the item or the card as well. See, it's gone to review. I can take it to done. It'll go through the entire process. And the same card, what I have over here, I can use it in a timeline model. I can show you over here. It'll automatically get a start date and a product end date. Yeah. So this is actually like a working Gantt chart that you have. You can extend timelines, you can minimize your timelines, and share it with anyone that you want to. One more feature I wanted to showcase on Creately is the embed feature. So let's go into the embed tab over here. So this will allow us to embed any type of videos from YouTube and multiple platforms. And also it'll give us to embed links from Excel, Word, Google Sheets, or even Google Docs. So let me go ahead and let me show you how the embed feature works. Let's take a Google Sheet over here, and I have a sample sheet, and let's use this link. And it's a matter of copying this link into the Creately workspace, and it is processing. And now you'll have the entire Google Sheet visible on the Creately workspace. The best part about this is you could edit the entire Google Sheet on Creately itself. You could add anything over here. Let me go and add things, and you can switch between tabs and do multiple edits. Also, let me show you how you can embed a YouTube video. uh, go go into the tab. I have a sample video over here, and let's copy the link. Okay, and you can play the video on the workspace itself. So let me also walk you through the dashboard side of Creately, the data panel over here that you have. So moving on to the folders, you can have multiple folder structures according to your requirement. It can be even project wise, it can be department wise, whatever fits your requirement, you can enable the folder structure. And also what you see over here is the task list. So any task assigned to you on the canvas would be listed over here. So these are the tasks, my pending tasks that I have to do, and these are the tasks that I've completed already. And then moving into the databases. So for an example, if you have a previous set of documents that you worked on, or for an example, a CSV file, a Google Sheet, anything of that matter, you can import those files into Creately, and you can use those data without starting from scratch. The next one would be the alerts. Any notifications or any changes or edits done into the workspaces would be listed over here on the alert section. So these diagrams that I showed you before, the entire diagram could be exported in multiple formats, maybe PNG, SVG, JPEG, CSV, or PDF. And moving on to the sharing capabilities of Creately, you could collaborate or share this workspace with individuals by putting their email addresses, or you can create a subset of people, a sub team or an entire team, and you can share this workspace with the entire team. There are two types of access levels that you can give the users. So one is editorial access, the next is viewer access. So the editorial access users, they can come into the workspace and they can edit the entire workspace, whereas viewers can only come into the workspace and just view the diagrams only. They cannot edit any diagrams, they can just view only. So this is how Creately works, and I'd like to invite Chuck again to carry on with the session.
All right. Are you seeing the slides?
Yes, we are.
All right. Very good. So as I promised earlier, I'm now going to share the last two steps of the creative process with you. Step 4 is evaluation. Remember we talked about the need to separate ideation and evaluation? This is the step where you put on your logical, practical hat and consider the value of each idea, ideally by giving it a numerical value. Your ultimate goal is to isolate a handful of ideas that will meet your requirements. One simple way to do that is something called dot voting. The way it works in some collaboration tools is that each participant gets a certain number of votes. Each of them is represented by a dot. Team members are free to place dots on any ideas that they like. They can divide them up or place multiple dots on the ideas that they like a lot. You then total up the number of dots each idea receives, and that equals its score. The ideas that got the most votes, of course, are the ones that you're most likely to implement. There's a few drawbacks to dot voting that I want to highlight. First, it tends to become a popularity contest. In other words, you look at the ideas that are getting the most votes in real time, excuse me, and you tend to gravitate to those too. It's just kind of a social behavior. Also, sometimes there's not a clear winner. But the biggest drawback, in my opinion, is that dot voting is really only one-dimensional. It's a simple measure of popularity. What if you want to do a more nuanced evaluation of your ideas, perhaps considering them from a couple of different criteria? And that's what I'm going to show you now. First, you need to decide on what those criteria should be, to which you attach a numerical rating scale. In the example on this slide, I've listed 3 of them: ease of implementation, cost of implementation, resources required, whether that happens to be manpower, budget, or other limited assets needed to get a project done. Another one might be, how well is this idea aligned with our corporate culture? You then assign a rating scale to each of these criteria, say 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. And the higher the number, the greater the value it has on that dimension. Here's where it gets really interesting. A tool like Creately enables you to attach notes and other data to any idea on its canvas, as Siobhan just showed you. Here's a simple example I created using a table in Creately's notes view to score the idea to which it's attached. You would then repeat this idea for each of the ideas you generated. As you can see, our 3 criteria are here, as well as a total. Now you end up with a more balanced ranking of your ideas. But again, as Siobhan showed you, Creately gives you another option. You can import a range of spreadsheet cells into your workspace and attach them to an idea. This gives you the advantage of automatically totaling the score of an idea. It can also come in handy if, for whatever reason, you decide you want to assign different weights or levels of importance to each criterion. You can simply write a formula in Google Sheets or Excel to weight each criterion the way you want. Then the final step, step 5 of the creative process, is implementation. Your visual tool gives you a flexible canvas where you can convert your ideas into action plans, as Siobhan just showed us, whether that involves Kanban boards or Gantt charts or whatever. You can manage tasks within it. This is the step where you take your idea and turn it into action. You create timelines, decide who will accomplish each task, and what other resources might be required. And at this point, it becomes more of a typical project planning and management scenario. So one of the last things we'll talk about here is the challenges of running brainstorming sessions. As we've already talked about earlier, it's hard to do them well. There's a lot of planning and thinking that has to go into it. It's not necessarily hard. It's just you need to take these steps to prepare to make sure that you get the maximum value out of it. So first, as I emphasized earlier, you need to have a clear objective. You need to have a mission or a problem to solve. And that is really to focus everyone's thinking. Otherwise, what tends to happen in brainstorming sessions is people are throwing out all kinds of ideas, but maybe only some of them are actually relevant to the problem you're trying to solve. So you want to make sure you avoid that and keep everyone focused on a singular mission. Second, a lack of structure or process can derail a lot of brainstorming sessions. Without it, your team could end up solving the wrong problem like we talked about, or more commonly, once they've gotten all of the initial set of ideas out of their head, the momentum quickly withers. And if your team members don't feel you have a clearly defined plan for your time together, I would suggest that they may not bring their best creative thinking to that session. I'd like to highlight 2 other potential points of failure that I've seen. First, peer pressure is a bigger deal than most people realize. You're essentially opening yourself up to criticism from your coworkers potentially. If you share ideas that are perceived as being a bit more out there or extreme, you could be judged. Nobody wants that. So the reaction to peer pressure is that people then tend to hold back from sharing their best ideas. They'll share safe ideas, but the ones that are really valuable, the ones that you want, may never make it to the canvas. That's why it's so important to create a safe environment for creative sharing. Groupthink is a related problem. If we all think the same way, then none of us is very creative. Remember, divergent thinking means in part that we need to consider multiple different points of view that we may not have even considered. Finally, it's critical to keep participants engaged. You're asking a group of people who are already overworked, they're probably tired, unfocused, they're worried about the work piling up while they're in this brainstorming session. So you need to create a fun, engaging event that also achieves its goals. It's not an easy balance, I'll admit, but I recommend including time in your brainstorming session schedule for frequent breaks, maybe a few fun side activities that can keep your participants on their toes, both mentally and physically, get them moving around. Obviously, this is a bit harder if you're conducting a virtual brainstorming session, but if you're creative, as I assume you are, I'm sure you could devise some fun games and activities to keep your brainstorming participants engaged. If you keep these things in mind, I think you'll increase your odds of managing a successful brainstorming session. And I'll turn it back over to Siobhan to share some closing remarks with you.
Thank you so much for the valuable input, Chuck. I myself learned quite a lot, and I hope it's the same for all of you joining in. So before we wrap things off today, so I'd like to introduce you to the Creately business plan. So even if your team consists of 5 or 500 users, this plan would ideally work for you. So this business plan consists of an extensive set of templates to cater to all organizational departments, name it be marketing, HR, product, sales, and many more. So we support integrations with MS Teams, Slack, Jira, and many more. And we also look into customized integrations upon customer request. Above all this, Creately is SOC 2 and ISO 9001 certified with data residencies across US, Australia, and the EU. So this business plan is priced at $89 a month for unlimited number of users. Also, for all the webinar attendees today, you could use the code shown below to get a 20% off on this plan. So if you're interested in this plan or need more information on this, please reach out to us on sales@creately.com, and we'd be happy to assist you further. So just let's see if we have any questions for today before we wrap things off. I don't think we have any questions as of yet, but if you do have any questions, please write to us on the same email address, which is sales@creately.com, and we'd happy to assist you. And that's it for today, and we hope to see you all in another episode of our webinar series. Thank you, everyone, for joining in, and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.